We are all hot and bothered about one particular Ravens receiver. By the way, good news from Ravens practice today. Zay Flowers back on the practice field after that quad contusion on Saturday. It looked bad, it turns out. It was just he was going to be day-to-day, and Jesse Minter really meant it when he said day-to-day, because here we are just a couple of days later, and Zay Flowers is back on the practice field. There's one other Ravens receiver who everybody's talking about. That video courtesy of Jamison Hensley of ESPN. One other Ravens receiver everybody's talking about. Should we be jumping on the Jacoby Lane train? Joining us now, former Super Bowl champion Ravens wide receiver, WJZ 13 analyst, and just overall friend of the people, our buddy Qadry Ismail is back with us now here on GCR. Qadry, what's up, pal? How are you, my friends?
Doing well. Football season has arrived. What better time of the year it is?
All right, Qadry, how do we talk like adults about Jacoby Lane? Because I don't ever want to yuck someone's yum. I don't ever want to say, hey, don't be excited. As you point out, football's back. We just want something to be excited about, and there's not a game that matters for another month. But I still feel like, we're still talking about someone who's never played in a game before, was a third-round pick. Like, how do we have an eloquent version of this conversation about what this young man is doing in practice versus what our expectations should reasonably be?
So here's the thing. When you look at the practices in its totality, he has been building a strong resume to say, I can do this. What is this? Well, as a receiver, first thing is catching a ball. Second thing is, getting separation. Third thing is making contested catches. Fourth thing is making the big splash play. Fifth thing is, can you do a consistent job of blocking? The priority is lining up correctly and being able to do all those that I just listed. If you look at it, he's checked off those boxes, and I'm not going to say 10 out of 10 times, but I would say for a rookie, there's been times where he has done 8 out of 10. Maybe he has to improve, and it's still a 6 out of 10. But at no point in time do you see this deer in the headlights 1 out of 10 where it's like, man, this dude is not ready. So that's where I think for me, as I've seen it, he's grown in his ability to show us, the fan base, that, okay, you know what? I think he might be able to do this thing. So the next step is obviously coming up over the weekend when you're going to be going up against another team in a preseason game. But we'll see how that looks.
I think what you just said is really important to hear too, Qadry, because I know you're out there and you're watching it with an eye that many of us are not capable of having because, one, we didn't play at all, more or less the position at a high level. But what you just said there is that we're all seeing the splash plays, right? Like Twitter is seeing the incredible one-handed snags. We just shared one that the Ravens put out. They're seeing that. You're saying it goes beyond that with Jacoby Lane, that he looks the part just with his technique and what he's doing when he's not making splash plays.
Correct. So here's one thing. When he was in OTAs, you could see where he was kind of running and doing his thing. It's like, okay, we'll see how he improves. But they didn't have any one-on-one against a defensive back, so it was like, all right, no problem. When you see him in training camp, he goes up against Marlon Humphrey. Marlon has seen pretty much the gamut of wide receivers. And the one-on-one route he wins on gets Marlon. Great. But then he comes back in the team period, and Marlon just literally rides him all the way down the field. And if I'm the quarterback, I ain't throwing it to you because you ain't get open. You got hemmed up. And now you kind of in the back of your mind like, ooh, that's interesting. I don't know. I know he made a great catch, but that was one-on-one. This right here, this is team period. He got hemmed up. How does that look? But then you see where he comes back again against the same defensive back, and he wins. And so you're like, oh, okay. So you learned. You didn't just stay the course and say, oh, I'm only a rookie. This is what is expected of me. No, he improved. So every time you see a challenge, you also see him improve off of said challenge. And there's a plethora of opportunities that he has improved upon when he was given it. And again, the biggest thing in my mind, the fact that you're going with the first group and you're running in the slot and or you're running on the outside and you're doing it with poise says an awful lot about how you're studying and how you're preparing to play. You're not lining up and looking over at a Bateman or Zay Flowers, or you're not looking back at the coach and like, hey, what do I got? You're not doing any of that. You're just going out there with confidence, lining up and ready to go. So that shows me that he's like, okay, cool. The game is not too big for me.
Super Bowl 35 champion Qadry Ismail with us here on GCR. Qadry, we saw like the catch radius in college was obvious for Jacoby Lane. The questions were about his ability to get separation. You allude to, this sequence that you see that included at one point Marlon Humphrey being all over him. Acknowledging again, it's just training camp, but in watching him, what have you seen regarding his ability to just create separation in his matchups?
Yeah, so again, we'll go back to Marlon because then it was like 4 or 5 practices later, and so they are doing one-on-one again, and literally he just sticks his foot in the ground, gets off the line of scrimmage, but Marlon, for the most part, because he's a veteran and he knows, has him in great position. He's just a touch high, and he is inside of him. Well, Jacoby takes his time, gets his depth, gives him a move, and literally separates from him. And Marlon actually slips or falls. Jacoby makes the catch. And I kind of smile because for me as a receiver, that's like, darn near nirvana.
Wow.
And so you're like, okay, good. You did what you needed to do as a young receiver, and that's what you're looking for.
I feel like there's a broader conversation that I've been dealing with, Qadry, which is I'm so used to having covered like John Harbaugh for so long that one of my skepticisms about how much we've been hyping Jacoby Lane is right, but he's a 3rd-round pick. Is he really going to be given those types of opportunities? I guess what I've had to realize is, well, we don't know. When it's Jesse Minter and Declan Doyle making the decisions, we don't have a track record with those guys. Like, I guess it's twofold for me. Do you think it's possible that maybe in their mind they're saying, look, if Jacoby plays like this during camp in the preseason, it's not just that we're going to give him opportunities. Like, he could maybe even be competing to be the number 2 receiver on this team. And do you feel like you've seen the type of thing that maybe they should be thinking about him that way and not just limiting him to he was a mid-round pick?
Well, I mean, obviously, every coach has their kind of way of doing things and their system and all the things. I think the good coaches see talent, but they continue to cultivate it and they don't put unrealistic expectations on him.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need to pump the brakes as far as the second receiver, and there's really clearly far and away the number 1 go-to guy, and that's obviously Zay Flowers. But outside of that, within this Declan system, what I've seen in camp is what I've seen from the Bears, what I've seen from the Saints. It's like, look, we know, if you do your job, you're going to get the ball. We're going to give you opportunities to get in position to have a quarterback get you the football. I've seen it clearly with Rashad Bateman. I've seen it with Tez Walker. I've seen him be creative and getting the ball to Zay, but outside of Zay, we're not talking about him. But I've also seen where, with the progression of the play call, we've also seen Jacoby be in that position to make the play, and he's done that. I think when it comes to this preseason, because they still got, the joint practices to evaluate, I think it's going to be a situation where you're going to have an opportunity to feature him to say, okay, what do you got? What can you do in these stress situations? If he continues to pass, which I think, so far so good, he should. And if Zay and Bate continue to progress, I think it's going to be a bunch of dudes that are going to be balling out. And then you got Zay Flowers, who's going to be the featured guy. And that's how I see this offense unfolding.
Qadry, I feel like what you just brought up is sort of, to me, the biggest storyline for the preseason games themselves is just trying for me to figure out how this group sort of falls into line behind, to your point, Zay, Bateman, and then at the tight end position, Mark Andrews, where it feels like there's a bunch of guys, but I'm just not sure yet, with maybe the exception now being Jacoby Lane, who looks like he has separated himself as among the wide receivers, but there's still a lot of time between now and the opener. Like, who's definitively got a role? Who might be fighting for a roster spot? Because, like, we were all spending most of the offseason talking about Tez Walker as someone that we were ready to see a whole lot more of, and I don't know that he's had a bad camp. I know everybody's been praising him for the most part. Like, that to me is still fascinating, is how these two position groups sort of fall in line behind the couple of knowns that the Ravens have at the top.
So let me be crystal clear. Tez Walker is having a great camp. I think if anyone says otherwise, they're fooling themselves and they don't know what they're looking at.
Yeah.
I think Rashad Bateman has had an outstanding camp himself, and it's just the fact that Bateman has been around and he has done what he's done. I think, again, he's going to flourish in Declan's offense. But I think, Tez, you'll be a fool to say, oh, well, Tez, we don't know if he, okay, shut the front door. You don't know what you're talking about. Tez is going to be in the mix. Now, bigger picture-wise, you said the tight end group. I'm not even sure who's going to do what in the tight end group, because no one really has, and that includes number 89, no one has really just said, hey, I'm elevating the level of play in this group. I've seen a lot of inconsistencies across the board from that entire group, which is very shocking, because I thought that group, of all the groups, would be the one that would be like, oh, yeah, we can count on that group. But who knows?
Wow. That's certainly something we're going to have to be watching for in these games. What else, as we shift from training camp to preseason games, what are the other questions that you still want to have answered before we get to week 1 in Indianapolis?
Yeah, I want to see Danny Pinter. I want to see how he progresses. It looks like, they're saying there's competition. Posick isn't the lock starter. So I'm curious to see what he looks like. I'm curious to see Adam Randall, what he's going to look like in the flow of the offense. I know that they're giving the backs a lot of opportunities to catch the ball out of the backfield as well as run the ball. I think defensively, you got your guys, obviously the Nate Wiggins of the world, but what about the Keon Martins of the world? How is he going to continue to look and progress? Jalen Hawkins, I mean, man, I'd be kind of nervous to run routes and do some things with him, because he's getting caught up in some of his aggressive play, but maybe perhaps that's something that you could see.
That's okay
team.
when there's another color on the field, right? When it's not Zay Flowers that you're talking about.
I mean, Zay Flowers. There's a couple other dudes that he was kind of like friendly firing, getting up against. But and then I think just special teams as a whole. I think Anthony Levine, co-cap, he has done a great job in the practices. You could just see that group looks intense, but I'd love to see just what it all looks like, put together. I think Easley is as advertised as a punter, but the group at large, the special teams group at large, that's where a lot of guys are going to make the team, and I'm just curious to see how that's all going to translate.
Qadry, where's your confidence with Tyler Loop going into the year? It's not just the one miss that everybody thinks about. It's that we just didn't see him kick a lot of long kicks last year. He didn't make many of the ones he tried. He didn't attempt a whole lot of them. The Ravens didn't bring in like serious competition for him. They clearly seem to be committed. I know he got off to a bit of a shaky start to camp, but has looked a lot better of late. Where is your confidence level going into the year?
Well, knowing what I know about his dedication and his mindset, I'm team Luke. I don't see that it should be a doubt or sitting there and having a cause for concern. I think last year isn't in the rearview mirror for us as Ravens fans, but I think for him it is, and rightly so. I think that this coaching staff will, do its job when it comes to the strategy of the kicks, as opposed to abandoning it. And I think, he will have the full confidence of being able to go out there and knowing that this is what they need to do to process to make the kick through the uprights.
Qadry Ismail, you want to remind everybody about missile training?
Yeah, missile training is where human movement and sports performance training meets, and missiletraining.com is where you can interact with me. Doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter your sport, and if you are an individual, if you're a team, or if you're an older person looking for better opportunities to move well and fluid, missiletraining.com is where you can come and interact with me.
Hit him up at I am Qadry Ismail on Twitter, and you can get in touch with him that way. Qadry, always appreciate you, brother. Thanks for taking the time. Let's talk again soon, all right?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Thanks, man. Qadry Ismail with us here on GCR.